Welcome back to Reddit Audio Tales. Today's story is about a woman who is already broken from betrayal when a new guy gave her hope, only to crush her all over again. A tale of lies, pregnancy, ghosting, and emotional destruction. Let's dive in. I'm Amanda, I'm 28, and this whole thing started when my life was basically falling apart. My husband, Jared, well, soon-to-be ex-husband, had been cheating on me for months with some girl from his office. Found out when I saw texts on his phone while he was in the shower. Real classy stuff, talking about how much better she was than me, how I was boring and predictable. So there I was dealing with divorce lawyers and trying to figure out how to restart my entire life, when, surprise, I find out I'm pregnant. For months along with his kid. Perfect timing, right? My friends kept telling me I needed to get back out there, that I couldn't let Jared destroy my confidence completely. Luckily, my friend's coworker Richard, this guy from her office who always seemed nice enough, he kept saying he had this perfect guy for me. Someone stable, someone who'd actually treat me right for once. And honestly, I needed that. I needed to feel like I was worth something again. Like maybe someone could actually choose me and stick around. Between us, I was terrified that being divorced and pregnant meant I'd be alone forever. That no decent guy would ever want someone with all my baggage. So when Richard finally introduced me to Connor at some work gathering, I was immediately interested. Connor was 27, had this steady career, seemed really put together. Not flashy or trying too hard like most guys I'd met. Just solid, you know? When he asked me out, I said yes, without even thinking about it. Our first date was actually amazing. We went to this coffee place downtown. Nothing fancy, but we talked for hours about everything. Work stuff, movies, random things that made me laugh. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not the betrayed wife, not the woman whose husband preferred someone else, just me. He walked me to my car and asked if I wanted to go out again. I said yes immediately. Driving home, I felt this spark of hope I hadn't felt in forever. Maybe I could have a fresh start. Maybe someone could actually see me as more than damaged goods. The pregnancy thing. Look, I know how that sounds, but I was already showing enough that I had to start wearing loose clothes. I wasn't trying to trap anyone or play games. I just needed to see if this could be something real first. If Connor was actually interested in me as a person before everything got complicated. Because honestly, between us, I was scared out of my mind. Scared that no one would ever want me with all this drama. A divorce that wasn't even final yet. A baby on the way. All the ongoing mess with Jared. I just wanted one person to see me first, you know? To like me for who I was before all the heavy stuff came out. And Connor did seem to really like me. He texted me that night saying he had a great time. Asking when he could see me again. For the first time in months, I went to sleep feeling like maybe everything would actually work out. Maybe I could have both. Someone who cared about me and helped raising this baby. I honestly wasn't sure I could handle alone. I know what you're thinking. I should have told him right away. But have you ever been in that position? Have you ever felt so worthless that you just needed someone to choose you first? I wasn't trying to trick him. I was trying to survive. And honestly, if he really liked me, the pregnancy shouldn't have mattered, right? That's what everyone always says. If someone really cares about you, they'll accept your whole situation. Well, I was about to find out if that was actually true. So Connor texts me 2 days later asking if I want to go to dinner Friday night. Nothing fancy, just this casual place near his apartment. I spent way too much time getting ready, trying on different outfits that would hide my bump but still look cute. I was nervous but also excited. This felt real. Like maybe I could actually have something good happen to me for once. We meet at the restaurant, and he's already there waiting, which I appreciated. Dinner starts off great. We're laughing, talking about random stuff, and I'm thinking this could actually work. He's telling me about this camping trip he wants to take, and asking if I like outdoor stuff. I'm nodding along, thinking about how Jared never wanted to do anything adventurous with me. Connor seems different, more present, like he actually wants to spend time with me. But then I start feeling it. That familiar tightness in my shirt. The way my body's changing that I can't hide forever. I realize I have to tell him. I can't keep pretending this isn't happening. I can't go on a third date in baggy clothes hoping he won't notice. So I take a deep breath and just say it. Connor, I need to tell you something. I'm pregnant. About 4 months along. The silence that followed was brutal. He just stopped talking mid-sentence about some work story and stared at me. Not angry. Not upset. Just processing. Like his brain was trying to catch up with what I just said. I quickly explained about the divorce. About Jared cheating. About how this wasn't planned. And I wasn't looking for a father figure or anything like that. I told him I just wanted to be honest because I liked him and didn't want to start something based on lies, which was mostly true. I mean, I did like him. I just also desperately needed someone in my corner. He asked a few questions. How far along? When was I due? Was I keeping it? Basic stuff. But his whole energy changed. The easy conversation we'd been having just died. He got quiet, started checking his phone more, kept looking around the restaurant like he was planning his escape route. I tried to salvage it, talking about how I wasn't expecting anything from him, how I just wanted us to get to know each other without secrets. But you could tell he was already gone mentally. When the check came, he paid quickly and said he'd walk me to my car. The whole walk was awkward as hell. I kept trying to make conversation, but he was giving me one-word answers. When we got to my car, I asked if he wanted to see me again. That's when he said it. That he didn't think he was ready for the responsibility of being involved with someone who was pregnant. That it wasn't personal. He just wasn't in that place in his life. Responsibility. Like I was some burden he'd have to carry. Like my baby was this obligation he'd have to take on instead of just part of who I was. I smiled and said I understood. But inside I was furious. This was exactly what I was afraid of. The second men find out you come with complications, they run. They want the fun parts of a relationship without any of the real-life messiness. I drove home feeling more alone than I had since finding out about Jared's affair. Connor didn't text me after that night, which honestly I was expecting, but it still stung. I kept checking my phone for 3 days like some pathetic teenager waiting for her crush to notice her. By day 4, I realized he really was just going to pretend our 2 dates never happened. Classy. What I wasn't expecting was Richard calling me up, all frustrated, asking what happened between Connor and me. Apparently Connor had told him he wasn't interested in pursuing anything. And Richard was annoyed because he'd talked me up so much. Like I was some product he was trying to sell that didn't live up to the marketing. When I told Richard what happened, he got weirdly defensive about Connor. Started going on about how Connor's a good guy who just knows what he wants. How not everyone is ready for that kind of situation. But then he said something that really got under my skin. He asked why I didn't tell Connor up front about being pregnant. Like it was my fault for not leading with my most complicated issue. I explained that I wanted him to get to know me first, to see if we had a connection before bringing up the heavy stuff. Richard just sighed like I'd done something wrong. Then he started telling me about how Connor had been talking to their other coworkers about it, saying he felt misled and didn't know how to handle the situation. Misled. Like I'd committed fraud by being pregnant and not announcing it in my dating profile. The more Richard talked, the more defensive I got. I reminded him that he'd been the one pushing this connection, telling me Connor was such a great guy who was looking for something serious. Well, if he was looking for something serious, wouldn't that include being with someone through life's complications? Richard backtracked, saying he still thought Connor was a good match, but maybe the timing was just off. Timing, right? Because there's a perfect time to be a divorced pregnant woman in the dating world. After we hung up, I couldn't stop thinking about how unfair the whole thing was. I'd been completely honest about who I was and what my situation was. Just not in the order Connor apparently wanted. And now somehow I was the bad guy for not trauma dumping my entire life story on a first date. The worst part was imagining Connor at work, probably getting sympathy from everyone about the crazy pregnant woman who tried to trap him. Because that's how these stories always get told, right? The woman is always the manipulative one, even when she's just trying to navigate an impossible situation. I started getting angry. Not just disappointed, but actually angry. At Connor for being so closed-minded. At Richard for setting me up without thinking it through. At the whole stupid idea that women need to disclose every single detail of their lives up front while men get to reveal their baggage at their own pace. The more I thought about it, the more I realized Connor had done me a favor. If he couldn't handle dating someone with real-life situations going on, he definitely couldn't handle being with someone long-term. Better to find out now that he was looking for something easy and uncomplicated rather than wasting more time on someone who would bail the moment things got real. A week went by, and I couldn't let it go. The more I replayed that dinner in my head, the angrier I got. Connor acted like I deliberately deceived him, but all I did was get to know someone before sharing my most personal business. Since when is that a crime? I kept thinking about how different his energy was after I told him. Like I'd suddenly become this completely different person just because I was pregnant. The same woman he'd been laughing with 5 minutes earlier was now too complicated for him to handle. It was complete garbage. I started venting to my friends about it, and most of them agreed that Connor was being unreasonable. They said any decent guy would at least give it a chance, especially if there was a real connection. My friend Kelsey pointed out that I wasn't even asking him to be a father figure. I just wanted to continue dating and see where it went. But apparently even that was too much responsibility for him. The thing that really set me off was when I ran into Richard at the grocery store, and he mentioned that Connor had started dating someone new. Someone from his gym who was uncomplicated and drama-free. Drama-free. Like being pregnant makes me dramatic. Like going through a divorce because my husband cheated makes me this chaotic person who brings nothing but problems. I smiled and congratulated Richard on Connor finding someone so perfect, but inside I was seething. So Connor could move on immediately and find someone new, but I was supposed to just accept that my situation made me undateable? That was when I decided I needed to say something. Not to win him back or anything pathetic like that, but because he needed to understand what kind of person he really was. I got his number from Richard under the pretense of wanting to return something Connor had left in my car, which was a lie. But Richard didn't need to know that. I texted Connor asking if we could talk briefly. He said sure, probably thinking I was going to apologize or something. We met at a coffee shop near his work, and I could tell he was uncomfortable the whole time.
Good.
I told him I wanted to clear the air about how things ended between us. That I understood he wasn't interested in dating me, but I thought he should know how his reaction had come across. I explained that I hadn't been trying to deceive him. I just wanted him to get to know me as a person first. That seemed reasonable to me, and I thought it would seem reasonable to him too. Connor got defensive immediately, saying he never said I was trying to deceive him, but that he just wasn't ready for that kind of situation. When I asked what that kind of situation meant, he started fumbling around talking about how dating someone who's pregnant is complicated and he wasn't sure he could handle it emotionally. I pointed out that he'd seemed fine handling it for the first part of our dinner conversation before he knew about the pregnancy. That the only thing that changed was his knowledge of my situation, not who I was as a person. He didn't have a good answer for that. Then I mentioned that I'd heard he was already dating someone new, someone drama-free. His face got all flushed, and he said that wasn't really my business. I agreed it wasn't my business, just like my pregnancy wasn't really his business after 2 dates. But apparently we both felt entitled to have opinions about each other's choices. After that coffee shop conversation, I thought I'd get some closure and be able to move on. But Connor's attitude just kept bothering me. The way he acted like I was being unreasonable for wanting him to explain himself properly. Like I should just accept his rejection without question and disappear quietly. Well, I wasn't going to disappear quietly. I started paying more attention to his social media. Not stalking, just checking occasionally to see what Mr. Two-Shit, drama-free, was up to. And sure enough, within 2 weeks of our breakup, he was posting pictures with his new gym girlfriend. Beach trips, dinner dates, the whole relationship, highlight reel. The same guy who said he wasn't ready for complicated situations was apparently ready enough for someone who fit his perfect little criteria. It made me sick watching him play happy couple while I was dealing with morning sickness and divorce paperwork alone. I commented on one of his pictures, nothing crazy, just looks fun with a smiley face. He deleted it within an hour and sent me a text asking me to please not contact him or comment on his stuff anymore. Like I'd committed some major boundary violation by leaving a 2-word comment. That's when I really lost it. I screenshot his text and posted it on my Facebook with a caption, "When you politely comment on someone's public post, and they act like you're harassing them." I didn't mention his name or tag him, but our mutual friends knew who I was talking about. The post got a lot of supportive comments from my friends saying he was being dramatic and that I deserved better. Richard saw it though, and he was not happy. He called me up all angry, saying I was being inappropriate and needed to leave Connor alone. That Connor was a good guy who didn't deserve to be put on blast for not wanting to date me. I told Richard that if Connor didn't want people commenting on his behavior, maybe he shouldn't behave badly. That rejecting someone for being pregnant and then immediately dating someone else sends a pretty clear message about what kind of person you are. Richard said I was taking it too personally and that Connor had every right to date whoever he wanted, which was true, but it was also true that I had every right to have opinions about it. The argument with Richard escalated when he said that maybe Connor would have been more open to the situation if I'd been upfront from the beginning. Like it was my fault that Connor couldn't handle real life. I told Richard that if Connor was the kind of guy who needed a complete rundown of someone's life situation before agreeing to a second date, then maybe he wasn't as great as Richard thought he was. That got Richard really fired up. He said I was being bitter and vindictive, that I was trying to punish Connor for being honest about what he wanted. I pointed out that what Connor wanted was apparently a woman with no complications, no history, and no real-world problems, and that if that's what he wanted, he was going to have a very shallow dating life. The conversation ended with Richard saying that if I kept causing drama, he was going to have to distance himself from the situation, like I was some crazy ex-girlfriend instead of someone who'd been on 2 dates with Connor and had legitimate feelings about how I'd been treated. But that threat actually made me more determined to not just quietly disappear. Why should I protect Connor's comfort when he'd made no effort to consider mine? 3 months later, my whole world fell apart in ways I never saw coming. The divorce with Jared was finalized, but the settlement was way less than I'd expected because apparently his lawyer was better than mine. I was barely getting enough to cover rent on a 1-bedroom apartment, let alone prepare for a baby. My work cut my hours because business was slow, and suddenly I was looking at being a single mom with no financial stability. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was finding out that Richard had been telling people about my obsessive behavior with Connor. Apparently, my Facebook post and our argument had been twisted into this story about how I was some unstable pregnant woman who couldn't handle rejection. Word got back to my boss through someone who knew someone, and suddenly I was getting pulled into meetings about my personal issues affecting workplace relationships. I tried to explain that it had nothing to do with work, that it was a private matter between friends, but the damage was done. They started documenting everything. My time off for doctor appointments, any personal calls I took, even my mood on particularly rough pregnancy days. When they finally let me go, they cited performance issues, but everyone knew it was really about the drama with Connor and Richard. So there I was, unemployed, pregnant, barely divorced, and somehow the villain in everyone's story. Connor, meanwhile, was thriving. I heard through mutual friends that he'd gotten promoted and was moving in with his drama-free girlfriend. The same guy who couldn't handle 2 dates with a complicated woman was apparently ready for serious commitment with someone who fit his perfect criteria. I tried to find new work, but being visibly pregnant and having questionable references made it nearly impossible. I ended up taking whatever retail positions I could find, barely making enough to cover my basic expenses. The stress started affecting my pregnancy. My blood pressure was high, I was constantly anxious, and I could barely afford proper prenatal care. 6 months after my baby was born, I was working 2 part-time jobs just to keep my head above water. My daughter was healthy, thank goodness, but I was exhausted, broke, and more alone than I'd ever been in my life. Jared had disappeared completely after the divorce, claiming he couldn't afford child support while somehow managing to take vacations with his new girlfriend. Meanwhile, Connor's life kept getting better. I'd see updates through social media, promotions, vacations, engagement announcements. Everything I'd hoped my life would look like was happening for him instead. The really twisted part was that people acted like Connor had dodged a bullet by not getting involved with me, like my struggles proved he'd made the right choice by running away from complications. Nobody seemed to consider that maybe if he'd stuck around, if he'd been the decent guy everyone claimed he was, my life might have turned out differently. But here's what really gets me. Everyone wants to act like Connor was just being honest about what he wanted, and that I should respect his choice. But what about what I wanted? What about my choice to be with someone who could handle real life instead of running away when things got complicated?
Nobody talks about that.
Nobody talks about how his rejection sent me into a spiral that affected every other part of my life. I'm not saying it's all his fault. Life is complicated, and lots of things went wrong. But I'll never forgive him for being such a coward when I needed someone to take a chance on me. And, honestly, I don't feel bad about calling him out for it. Some people deserve to be held accountable for how they treat others, even if it makes them uncomfortable. If Connor wanted a simple, drama-free life, he should have stayed on dating apps and filtered for women who had never experienced any real problems. But he didn't get to act interested in me, and then bail the second he found out I was human.